Hey everybody, I figured I'd put together a quick little video that shows how to take apart some of these parts in candy cabinets, specifically the Astro City that I've been working on. Some of these things I couldn't find exact information on. They weren't too hard to figure out how to take apart, but I figured since there wasn't a whole lot of information, this might be helpful. So the first thing is depinning amp up connectors. I know there is a video on this already, but I figured I'd just share a little bit more information on it, especially so you can hear the sound that it makes. To give you an idea of what to use, this is a sim tool that I got when I worked at Apple at the Genius Bar. It's basically a glorified paperclip, but it works just great. I obviously have pulled it out so that I can use it to depin stuff. So the way that this works is you want to put the pin in right over the top of the cable here. And then once it's over the center and top of the cable, just give it a little bit of a push and you should hear it click. All right, so we'll hear this click hopefully. And there you go. So you probably heard that click. Once you hear the click, just leave the pin, the paper clip or whatever you're using in there, and then give that a little bit of a tug. Sometimes just a little bit of a wiggle helps too. You don't want to pull too hard because obviously you'll rip the crimp apart. So just be careful not to force it too bad. You can see the insulation crimp in there, hopefully. Let's see if I can get that for you there. So you can kind of see right there, you have that little like M shape. You want to get right in the middle of that and above it. And you'll hear that little click and then it should pull out just fine. Now when you're reseating these, when you push them in, just make sure they're straight, push it in, and then you should feel a little bit of play back and forth. If it's playing back and forth a little bit, you know that it's in correctly. So you're good there. We'll depin this 12 volt wire here. It has a pretty nice audible click that you'll hear. And then hopefully you just heard that little click. All right, the next thing I want to show you is the coin reject or coin ejector. They just use this, I don't remember the name, pressure pin or something like that. But they're actually not too bad as long as you have a vise and some of these pin punch tools. I just picked these up at Lowe's for, I think it was like 20 bucks or 30 bucks, something like that. Anyway, just use the smallest one here and get a little bit of masking tape. This will make your life a little bit easier. And then what you want to do, these have some flat sides here where the jam nut is going to go on, so on the threads. So make sure that this pin is parallel to these flat sides here. And then you'll take your tape, just put it over the center here. And then what you'll do is you'll just push it down so that you can get to the pin. It doesn't need to be all the way, just enough that it sticks out. Okay, basically tape it into place. So now put this in your vise, maybe even get like a cloth or something like that just to protect it even more. And then once it's in your vise, you'll just put the pin punch right there, smack it with a hammer a few times, it'll pop right out, and then this will come apart. And so once that was apart, I was able to just tighten these pieces into the chuck of my drill. So my hand is my drill. I'd put them in like this, and then I'd just take some sandpaper, and it went from 400 grit all the way up to 3000 grit, and just spun them and shined them up, and then I used some polish at the end and came out looking pretty good. So that's how you take that apart. Putting it back together is just the reverse. There's a spring inside here, so you get everything back together. do that same thing with the tape, and then just put it in the vise and smack the pin back in place, and it's in there. So now the next thing is taking apart the cash box. Once this is out, so you'll need a couple things. First, you'll need just a drill with a bit that is just a little bit bigger than the top of the rivet here. So that will help you remove the rivet. And then you'll need a rivet gun and some new rivets. So I just grabbed some of these steel rivets. They are 3mm by 6mm, which is what the Astro City manual calls for. And then this rivet gun here has 3 different sizes for rivets. We're using the green because that's the one it calls for. I grabbed both of these at Lowe's. I think it was about $35 altogether. So I'm not gonna take this apart live, because if you undo one of these rivets, you gotta do all of them, because how the rivets look before they are broken off and everything is like this. So when you drill out the head of a rivet, which is this side here, this bottom piece falls into the cash box. So if I were to drill one of these out, I need to drill the other 2 out so that I can get the things out from in there so they're not rolling around. But just to give you an idea of what I would do, what you do is you place the drill bit right on top of the head of the rivet, and then as you drill, you just kind of do like some very light circles like this. Now, I will say if you use steel rivets, these can be a little bit harder to drill out. So if you have aluminum rivets where you're at, you can replace with aluminum. They'll be just fine. They're a little bit easier to remove the second time around. But you just kind of slowly do little circles as you're drilling. Eventually, you'll hear the bottom piece fall out. And then this you can just kind of flick off. Do that for all 3 of them. You got them out. All right, once you're ready to reinstall the rivets, just undo your rivet gun here and install the rivet. And then you'll put this end into the hole, and while you're applying pressure down, you just squeeze, and it usually takes maybe 4 or 5 squeezes. Just squeeze really hard and let it come all the way back up when you're done, and between each squeeze, I mean, and then it eventually you'll hear this long piece break off, and the rivet will be successfully installed. Now, to demonstrate what's happening inside the cash box when you're doing these rivets, I'm gonna try and show you what this looks like. So I'm just gonna hold this in place. Okay. You can see this end is starting to bulge a little bit. Obviously, when it's next to some metal, it's gonna start to clamp a little bit against the metal. Let's do another squeeze here. Sorry, the tripod's in a rough spot. And it'll just keep going until it creates enough pressure against the cash box to bust off. So anyway, that's what happens on the other side. Okay, last but not least is removing the original cable, the original power cable, and reinstalling a grounded cable. I don't feel like I should have to warn people of the dangers of electricity, so anyway, don't be dumb. Fortunately, in the United States, we have the same color coding as Japan, so our hot is black, neutral is white, and then from what I understand, outlets in Japan pretty much don't have a ground. So what we want to do is we want to add this ground wire to the cabinet. So we want to ground the cabinet to essentially the house. As you can see, I've already removed my original power cable, but I do need to remove this. So we're going to do that right now because I need to get this piece powder coated. Really, this is set up the same way that the original is. So if you had the original cable in here, it would just look like this. It would look just without the green. So your hot wire is going to go to this bottom right clamp here. Your neutral, you can go to the bottom left. Really, you just match up black and black, white and white. And then this will clamp to the ground right here. So if your cabinet has not been touched yet and you haven't removed this piece, you'll have a screw right here on the inside. So this is the inside of the cabinet. You'll have a screw right there that has a bunch of grounds. So you just add this to that bunch of grounds, and that will ground the cabinet and everything to the ground for your house wiring. Easy enough, they're not too bad. Now the trickiest part of these dumb things are these strain reliefs. So they are pretty easy to remove once you understand it, but the one that comes in the cabinet is definitely on there tighter than this one that I bought. So this will seem really easy. If you have the original wire in there, it'll be a little bit more difficult. So all you have to do is give this a good squeeze and twist, and you want to squeeze on that flat part, and then that'll pop right out. And there you go. Now for the cable, what to replace it with, I just grabbed an extension cable that had 18 gauge conductors and then cut off the end. I tried to get one that was about 6 feet, I think is what I did on this guy. I think the original was like 8 feet or something like that, but yeah, just give yourself a little bit of room, and then obviously give yourself some space on the inside so that you can kind of loop around. I really just cut these. I took the original cable out, and then I just cut these to be the same length as what was in there. There's that. That's how you remove this. I'll put a link to this strain relief if you want to use this same one to put this all back together. And these are pretty simple how they work. Really, they just clamp around the cable once it's in there. So to remove this, you can see there's this top piece here. That should just pull right up. And there you go. And then installation is the reverse of the removal there. There we go.